As a leader, is it better to be loved or feared? This is an age-old question. We must be talking about Niccolo Machiavelli and the prince. To be loved or feared, which is better? Well, Machiavelli will argue, of course, both. If a leader is able to be both loved and feared, that is optimal. But what happens if we have to choose? What happens if there's a circumstance where they're going to be loved or feared, which is better? Remember, Niccolo Machiavelli was a writer, politician, a political theorist, late 1400s, early 1500s, Florence, Italy. What he did is he observed around him. What he did was he actually was observing how men actually are as opposed to how they ought to be. During the Renaissance, people were very infatuated with the ancient times, with Cicero, with Aristotle, who wrote extensively about how men ought to be. They ought to be just. They ought to be ethical. What Machiavelli did is look around and said, really, those that are successful princes or leaders of these states are not ethical. They do not tell the truth. They are not kind. They use cruelty well. What does that mean? So Machiavelli looks and he asks once again, is it better to be loved or feared? And he breaks it down and he says, look, to be loved, let's say you're the leader of you're a principality, a small kingdom, and you throw on some great festivals. Everyone loves you. You are very generous. You give an awful lot to the peasantry and the rest. They really love you. What Machiavelli asserts is that men are fickle, men are selfish, men are self-involved, and that if the opportunity comes in which it's advantageous for them to turn against you, even though they love you, they will. Machiavelli argues, however, if they fear you, if they fear that negative things will happen to them, to their circumstance, to their families, or whatever, to their fortune, they will really think twice before they cross you. To be loved or feared. Machiavelli uses the example of Hannibal Barca to explain this. Hannibal Barca is certainly a character we love on this channel, and if you like what you're seeing on this channel, please take a moment to hit subscribe below. We'd really appreciate it. Hannibal Barca. Hannibal was a leader, many thousands of men that he was fighting against the Romans in the Second Punic War specifically. Many thousands of men in a foreign field. He had to keep these men, these mercenaries from many different countries together and united under very difficult circumstances. Machiavelli argues, how did he do it? Did he do it by being loved? Or did he do it by being feared? Machiavelli makes the argument that any successful military leader in history has been very feared by his men or his soldiers. Certainly there's respect. Certainly there's love. But they know not to cross Hannibal. He makes a very powerful argument. He says that historians will make comments such as, Hannibal was an amazing leader, but he was so brutal, as though the brutality somehow takes away from his generalship. What he's arguing is he was such an amazing leader because he was so brutal, because his men feared him. Machiavelli uses the example over and over that it is in fact better to be feared than loved. To be properly feared, Machiavelli goes into something he calls the proper use of cruelty. Let's think about this for a second. This is disturbing to modern readers. The proper use of cruelty. How in the world can you take something negative like cruelty and talk about a proper or improper use? How can you do that? Don't we want to put those in separate areas altogether? Well, Machiavelli, that's obviously disturbing now, and he knew it was disturbing to his contemporaries then. His contemporaries, once again, having been brought up on Cicero, on Aristotle, who said that no unjust act can create a positive outcome. Well, here Machiavelli he's challenging that. Can situations be better if you employ cruel means? The example he uses is you have Principality A. Principality A, the local leadership does not have the guts to clamp down. Everybody's going crazy. There is no law and order. The local farmers are being murdered. There's arson. There's rape. It's absolutely horrible. Situation one, the local leadership does not believe it is moral or ethical to clamp down on people, to chop off heads. Therefore, what Machiavelli would argue, a greater evil is occurring by having disorder. In Principality 2, what we have is a situation where we have all that law and order, But the prince, the leader, comes in, chops off heads, chops off arms, does what is necessary in a medieval sense. All of a sudden, there is peace. All of a sudden, the local farmers are able to take their products to market. Everyone is living in peace, and there's law and order. Machiavelli is asking us the question, which is better? Is it better to allow, through a sense of morality, allow disorder to prevail where additional people are being hurt? Or is it better to use cruelty, to be feared, to clamp down, and then have a society which is well run and people are safe? This is a question that he very much puts to us. Which do you believe is better? That's something we do on this channel. We ask that question. Is it better to be loved, or is it better to be feared? You decide.